Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to this webinar on the topic of running serverless computing with Knative in the IBM Cloud. My name is Adrian Kelly. I'm the Marketing Manager of DNAIT Solutions, and I'm joined this morning by Anton Wally, who's a Senior Cloud Architect in IBM. Throughout the session, please send us any questions that you might have come to mind or anything that you'd like to talk about, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So to kick off, I'd just like to introduce DNAIT and I suppose set a bit of context for who we are and what we're actually about, I suppose the role that we play in the IBM Cloud partner ecosystem in the IBM Cloud channel. So just a very brief introduction to set a bit of context, so I suppose it makes sense who we are and where we fit. So DNAIT, we're a managed services provider in the traditional sense, but we were quite a cloud-centric managed services provider based in Ireland. We have very much a security by design approach, a quality-driven approach. That's very much the ethos of the business and something we take quite a lot of pride in. We have a long-term sort of partnership mindset with our customers, and we have brought many companies along the cloud journey at this point from lots of different stages. So people that are going from virtual environments into the cloud model. Some people then want to evolve the cloud model into things like serverless and go to the next level. And there are still people who are going from on-prem into the virtual world. Like I said, the company has quite a strong ethos in terms of quality and excellence. We're an ISO 9001 business, shortlisted for a couple of Tech Excellence Awards last year. Very broad sweep of customers across a lot of different sectors, as you would imagine in this market, from construction to insurance and manufacturing and healthcare, a whole lot of sections, financial services, etc. The stack is fairly broad across managed IT as a service, security, consultancy, as you can see, procurement, and obviously then cloud in the center of the slide there. The partner mix is broad as usual, a lot of industry leading suppliers here in terms of the enterprise space, but IBM is our preferred vendor for cloud technology. And why did we choose IBM? From our perspective as a partner whose job it is to help companies migrate into the cloud and bring them along a cloud journey, we felt looking at it truly is the enterprise grade network that appealed to us the most, the enterprise grade architecture behind it. A lot of our customers' issues of data sovereignty, having global data centers linked with the quality of the network that the IBM Cloud is built on, and all of the benefits that have come with that from security and compliance and a truly enterprise grade infrastructure all the way through, that's absolutely the major drivers for us. We really do feel it's different from other clouds. Yes, these things are all good and they all have a lot in common, and there's a huge amount of overlap between all the major providers. But having said that, again, going head to head in the scenarios that matter to us and what our customers value, these are the key points that we really liked about the IBM infrastructure. Single pane of glass, the bare metal performance, and so on. These are the things that we found to be extremely appealing to our customers, and has proven to be a huge part of our success. What we bring to the table in terms of a partner, obviously you can go to IBM directly with these things. You can do all of that, but I guess from our perspective this is IBM's route to market for the mid-market of organizations of the world, is to work with partners like ourselves. And our role is to be the bridge between you and IBM, and to make it easy for you to get the best out of IBM's vast ecosystem of products and services. We're the leading cloud partner in this country, and very much driven by the idea that IBM is a huge organization, and it can be difficult for a mid-market organization to get the best out of dealing with IBM. So like I said, our experience being there, the central point of contact from everything from the technology portfolio to account management to the commercial side of the relationship. We take that and make it easy for you. And really, I guess the last thing is just whistling through these very quickly, is that it's our experience in a day-to-day sense of bringing organizations of every kind of a background, from the insurance sector to manufacturing environments, from a physical on-prem type of environment and into a cloud infrastructure, and all the vast changes that entails commercially and technically and in terms of business processes. So DNA have a huge amount of experience now in that area, 4 years down the road, made a lot of mistakes, a lot of learning curve, we'll be honest. And we have also built up a huge partner network of affiliate companies, contractors, and various other skilled third parties who we work with, which is absolutely essential to deliver these type of projects. There's a case study video there for you to look back on. This is a story of how we brought a company called Blue Insurance into the IBM Cloud environment, where they now run their entire business. And just to sum up, this is our final thought on it. This has been very quick, as I said, just to set a context for where DNAIT play here. It's about, it's not the destination, it's a journey. It truly is a journey, and it's an evolving journey. Like I said, we have people now in various stages of their cloud adoption. The ones at the most sophisticated end of it are looking at this morning's topic. Re-engineering applications, serverless computing, what does that mean for them? And that's why we decided to put this topic on this morning, to discuss that in some detail and answer your questions. So without further, I'm going to hand you over now to Anton Wally from IBM, and Anton will walk you through his slide deck on the very topic using Knative.
Okay, yeah, so this is sort of, as Adrian mentioned there, this is sort of part of a series that we're doing on OpenShift. And what we really want to focus on here is running Knative in IBM Cloud on Red Hat OpenShift. I want to give you some background around serverless computing in general. Sort of Adrian sort of started to mention what does that journey look like, sort of paint out that journey, why are people sort of migrating to this technology, and then look at some of the detail behind it as well. And if time permits, we might even jump into a little bit of code and just look at it sort of running within the environment as well. Okay, so with no more ado then, where does sort of serverless and Knative sit in the ecosystem, or sit in the journey? So what we see is the industry moving from bare metals. We've seen people understand the benefits of virtualization. So we've seen people move from sort of buying machines and installing software directly onto those machines. So you're buying machines, creating virtual environments, punching out virtual machines from the underlying servers, and being able to compartmentalize their software deployments at the hardware level using hardware level virtualization. That's the benefits of virtualization we're sort of seeing, but in virtual machines, but sort of the constraints of having to run multiple OSs per virtual machine was seen as sort of an unnecessary overhead. So we've started to see containers coming in on top of virtual machines, where containers are basically operating system level virtualization, where you get very good process level isolation, but you don't need to bring the problems, or you don't need to bring the management overhead of running multiple operating systems. So you get much better deployment density and much better operability, operational aspects to it, using containers when compared to virtual machines. And then even within containers, sort of this notion or concept of developing and building to the idea of an operating system. Some customers and some organizations are starting to see that as an overhead as well. So the fact that in container worlds, and I'll talk in more detail as we go through the slides, but the fact that in container worlds, your development teams still need to understand, are still in a operating system model deployment scheme. What serverless does is look at that idea and say, actually, why do developers need to think about servers? Why do they need to know about infrastructure? Can they not just write code that's looked after by whatever they're deploying it into? And that's what serverless computing is all about. It's about sort of a concept and an idea where you reduce the cognitive overhead for your development teams, and you have a clear sort of separation between your operations and your developer teams in terms of the services that are provided by the operations folks and the ones that are provided by the developer team, that are provided by the developers as well. Okay, so it's very much about moving as much as the operations aspects actually into the operations team, and leaving sort of your developers to focus on what they're good at as well. And there's other benefits as well, and I'll dive into those. But fundamentally, that's what this journey is about. Okay. So again, sort of to reiterate on this, we're talking about here is like from an applications perspective, we want to reduce, move away from sort of application level management and move that down into the infrastructure capabilities. Definitely a shift away, as I mentioned, as I say, away from operating systems, but also a huge shift away from sort of the ideas of sort of the 90s, early noughties of application servers that you deploy code into, and you have a single application server running multiple instances of an application. It's to get rid of that application server abstraction as well. And when you start to think about this, when you start to look at how applications are deployed in this traditional model, we see one of the main problems of traditional models is that eventing and getting integration between the different application runtimes is actually a hard problem to solve within a cloud environment. And what you also have in terms of deployment, and one of the problems with either containers or VMs is that how and when do you scale? How fast can you scale? How do I implement HA for this particular application? These types of questions have always been have always been a problem with the traditional model, and that's where serverless comes in to try and help resolve those types of issues. Okay, so what we try to do is have a per request per process model. So when you make a request into a server, a process starts and it services that request, and if it's not needed anymore, the process goes away. Whereas traditionally with application servers, etc., the application server would be up all the time. You want an infrastructure that provides HA, a multi-region by default. You want an event-driven programming model. So in order to actually drive these benefits, you want to move from having an application server stood up, where move away from that and only do things when certain events happen in your business. And that drives a much more cost-effective deployment paradigm. And you only want to be charged for what you're using. So again, with more traditional deployment technologies, there's an upfront cost with having lots of servers turned on and running these things, whether they're being used or not. Just reiterating on that point, again, it's really all about being as efficient as you possibly can within an organization and only paying for the resources that you're using. So that's an overview of what sort of serverless gives. Serverless has been around as a technology for a number of years. It was initially brought in by the public cloud providers, particularly AWS with technology they provide called Lambda, and IBM Cloud had a service called IBM Functions. Azure had Azure Functions, and this was sort of the first iteration of serverless technology. And while they were good and they provided a lot of benefits for organizations, there's a number of problems with using sort of the legacy serverless infrastructure. These are called out on this slide as the elimination of the limits. So the problems with sort of embedded platform-specific serverless technology, they limited CPU and the amount of disk that you could use. There was limitations on the amount of computational time you could use. So there was a window of there was a request window, and if your processing hadn't happened within that request or within that allotted time span, then the application would error out. They were also, and this is actually a key point for what we're seeing in terms of advantages of Knative, each of the serverless vendors, be it AWS, IBM Cloud, and AWS, had their own implementation of serverless. So there was very much a lot of lock-in around serverless technologies, sort of moving that, bringing the serverless technology paradigm. Say, if you wanted to bring it to your own data center, you want to bring it, you want to use it across multi-clouds. And as we're seeing with most cloud providers having outages over the past 2 months, we're seeing sort of the benefits of a multi-cloud strategy. If you have different serverless platforms across different cloud providers, the benefits of having sort of a serverless deployment model sort of go away if you have to build and write software for each of those cloud environments and manage it in a slightly different way. So what we're doing here is, and what Knative brings, is a consolidation. It eliminates the limits that we saw in Serverless 1.0, and it definitely is sort of the next iteration of sort of serverless technology. And the idea is that we actually, as well as sort of supporting or resolving those issues with the limits of Serverless 1.0, we want to see sort of a wider set of workloads that we can execute with Knative across our across customers and potential deployment targets. So we want to support that on request, on demand compute. It's really good idea for batch processing. So we want an environment where you can do batch processing really, really well. And most of the scenarios and workloads that we see on this slide are around sort of using serverless technology in a batch scenario, where you may want a longer running process than just a few seconds or a minute or something like that. So again, sort of image processing, genetic sequencing, sort of trade analysis, batch processing, ETL, these types of things. So any sort of scientific computing workload, you can now start to target with Knative and Serverless 2.0. So I've mentioned sort of serverless and sort of defined what serverless is, but sort of exactly what is Knative? So Knative is an extension of Kubernetes. Kubernetes being a container orchestration software that provides a set of components that enables Kubernetes to look and feel like a serverless paradigm. So Kubernetes was designed as a container orchestration technology. And if you remember that sort of slide deck, the initial slide where we had the journey from containers to, from bare metal to VMs to containers to serverless, Knative is a build on top of containers. It's not a separate technology that you have to introduce to your organization. The adoption of containers is very, very widespread, and Knative builds on top of that capability that a lot of people are targeting. And that's fundamentally Knative. It provides serverless functionality on top of a Kubernetes infrastructure. Okay, so and there's two sides to the Knative configuration. The service, Knative has this idea of a service. So a service is a definition which can be just a function, and we'll have a look at the code for this in a bit later. But it has a service definition. That service maps to a route, and the route, which is fundamentally just a network configuration, points to a specific configuration and a specific revision or a specific implementation of code that you want to run when a network, either a network request comes in, or in the case of eventing, where an event comes in, you want to execute a particular service. And Knative also provides an event broker, which in turn the broker works with the trigger to, when events come into the Knative environment, it can dispatch the events into a particular service. So you see Knative being integrated into event-driven architectures using sort of Kafka, drops being put into file storage, and a number of events on a public cloud platform. So there's two sides to it. There's the services side, which is sort of something waiting to be called, and there's the event side as well. And Knative looks after sort of both aspects of that. Okay, and this, in terms of the evolution of software development, moving from why people are moving from containers or looking at serverless as an evolution of containers, there are problems with containers. While they are a lot greater and a lot more benefits of running containers over VMs, the containers in and of themselves aren't a panacea. Okay, and we've seen this in the CNCF numbers that that they released as part of their survey, 2019 survey. So we're seeing this is basically the use of containers in production, and we are seeing that growth. So containers are definitely a technology that people are starting to adopt and are starting to understand the benefits of, and we're starting to see a lot higher footprint of larger container environments within our customer base. So we're seeing sort of the growth of 5,000 plus container environments, but there's still challenges that sort of remain with using that. Kubernetes provides quite a sizable overhead for development teams and for operations teams. When developers sort of look into Kubernetes, they want something that they can something that they can run easily, quickly, and securely. They expect more of a platform experience. And really what Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. And that's why our partners, Red Hat, build out OpenShift, is because they have built out an opinionated version of Kubernetes that can help solve some of these problems, but may not necessarily solve some of the dynamic scaling and some of the developer type problems that and usage patterns that developers expect to see. So that's really sort of a quick overview of sort of the challenges that sort of developers are seeing from a Kubernetes perspective. And again, it's not just the developer experience, although this scores very highly within the CNCF survey that was conducted. So the administration and operation experience of running a Kubernetes environment is certainly seen as a pain point. The multi-tenancy aspect, so how do you partition the workload and have all these capabilities provided by default by the platform, as opposed to it being something that has to be configured and tweaked, etc., etc. So this is why we are the focus on sort of Knative to be a default deployment and configuration of Kubernetes that accelerates application delivery. So where can I run Knative then? So because Knative runs inside OpenShift, you can run Knative anywhere. Red Hat OpenShift is available across all the public cloud providers. It's also available to be installed on-prem in your own data center, in your own private cloud. You can create a private cloud environment with this, and it provides OpenShift provides a set of key operational aspects, and we'll have a look at this when we step through the screens. But it provides a key set of operational services that allows you to run a serverless application framework in any environment. So again, it's in terms of an organization and a business, it's not just providing the digital teams within an organization sort of capabilities to accelerate their application delivery. Knative provides that serverless functionality across the organization. So for your middleware organization, for the folks still doing things on-prem, you can still use the same programming model and get the same acceleration as you would using it on a public cloud. So I mentioned specifically, I mentioned OpenShift. You could, because Knative deploys into OpenShift, you can deploy that anywhere. But just want to take a couple of moments to say, why would you deploy Knative into OpenShift and IBM Cloud over any other cloud provider? And I think there's a number of reasons on here, but really what I focus is on the blue areas. So IBM run huge Kubernetes instances on our public cloud platform. The majority of our PaaS services are provided on top of Kubernetes, so it is a production grade environment for IBM. That means we have to have things like multi-zone capabilities. We need highly available master node configuration. We need the ability to provision specific work pools for a cluster depending on the type of workload that we want to run. So we want to be able to run bare metal with it where we've got compute intensive workload. We want to have specific network configurations for a cluster. We can set up private networking for that cluster that's very configurable by the end user if required. So we can fit into a lot of connectivity scenarios where people are deploying in hybrid cloud and they're doing some on-prem and they need to connect their on-prem to public. And we've also got very tight integration with our other PaaS services in terms of our key protect configuration. So secrets management, et cetera, is very, very tight on the and integrated into the IBM platform. And again, integration with our security tooling, so Security Advisor, Vulnerability Advisor, sort of differentiates us from sort of other public cloud offerings where you can basically get an OpenShift from a public cloud provider. Our multi-zone capabilities really do differentiate us. So in terms of Knative software development, IBM provide an open source framework that can sort of help out with that, and this is sort of what we'll be stepping into in the next couple of slides. We provide a capability to develop Knative software using frameworks that your development teams would be used to using. So we provide Knative development capabilities for Spring Boot, and we provide it for Node.js, for Swift. You can see all the technologies that are supported there. And really what this is about is the ability to support enterprise development scenarios where you have an architecture team or an architecture function, either within a team or external to the team, that wants to define how applications are deployed and then allow the developers to pick up that architecture, those best practices, patterns, and develop and deploy into a Knative environment. And Apsody is our tooling for doing that. You don't have to use Apsody to deploy into Knative. You can build your own containers in whatever fashion you want, but IBM do provide sort of developer acceleration tooling, open source developer tooling in order to accelerate that adoption. Okay, so as I mentioned, we will just have a quick run through sort of what Knative looks like within an OpenShift environment. So I have this is my IBM Cloud account. I have an OpenShift environment that I can click into, and when I open the OpenShift web console, I have two views within the OpenShift platform. What I'm looking at here is sort of the deployment topology. So I can see, from a developer's perspective, I can see what's been deployed into the OpenShift container platform, and I can see what components are there, what's associated with the components, and I can see that running. So as we can see, sort of currently, if I hover over this, I think we see that a service is being displayed, and I can click into this and open up the service. So it's a very, very sort of simple application that just returns a very, very simple string. But as you can see there, we just snap back. You saw the sort of the blue circle be complete, and that was basically the application showing to be running. So prior to me making that call, there was no services running. But when I made a call into the application infrastructure, a server was started and the request was serviced. And then that will now stay up for a few minutes. And if there's no more requests, then it will scale back down to 0. And I think in terms of the integration of Knative into the OpenShift platform, I think really it'd be useful to look at sort of the administrator. From an administration perspective, Knative is installed as an operator. So OpenShift and OpenShift 4 really does focus on making the installation of third-party components from the Red Hat marketplace, be they predominantly open source components that are available in here, as seamless as possible, and operating those open source components to be as easy as possible. So there's a number of operators that are available for an OpenShift environment. for this demonstration environment, I installed the Knative operator. It's a few clicks, and what that does is provide a additional menu within this environment, so it's a fully integrated experience within OpenShift. I can see serverless. It installs a serverless menu, and I can see the services that I have installed from my development environment. So this is very much the administrator's view. I can see, as I mentioned, as you do releases, you can say which revisions should be available, etc., etc., and that's all available. Available to you in here. And I mentioned the routes, so I can, again, from an administrator's perspective, I can see which route is associated with which service, and I can also partition my routing as well. So if I wanted to do A/B testing, or I wanted to do gradual rollout of a service, then I can target that across, or I can implement that across my different implementations and do gradual rollouts of services. So very, very useful for upgrades and continuous deployment type scenarios where developer teams are accelerating their delivery, up to the point where teams can do 500 releases into production per day, because they've stepped, or they've understood the power of this technology, and they sort of have techniques in place where they can do gradual rollouts and get the benefits of using sort of dynamic routing and A/B testing, etc., within their serverless environment. So again, if I click on this, it again brings me to that to the same service that's available. Okay. And I think in terms of then sort of, I mentioned that's very much the operator aspect and the operational aspect of what we're looking at here. But in terms of, I sort of mentioned the developer experience, and I did warn you that we would be jumping into a bit of code here. So I have a service that I'm actually building out in Rust, which is a sort of native modern application development framework. That's sort of making a lot of noise at the moment. So what's key to the serverless paradigm is the fact that from a developer's perspective, it's just the business logic. So you will see in here that in terms of code that's associated with the application that I built out, there's just the API, and that's it. So within here, within this application code, I have a function that I define an endpoint on, and I've just got this returning this hello Rust Dublin. But that's it. I'm not importing lots of code. I'm not implementing the server as part of this library. I'm just writing the business logic, building and deploying. And that's a key part of sort of the benefits of serverless in here, is the fact that you have this very friction-free developer experience where you can just focus on the application code that needs to be deployed. Okay, so that's very much a whirlwind tour of Knative, of serverless to start with. What's serverless? What's it about? Where is it on the application lifecycle compared to bare metal, VMs, containers, and that journey? Hopefully, I've explained sort of where Knative fits in, the benefits of Knative over sort of the first iteration of serverless, and what the benefits are compared to sort of embedded platform as a service offerings, and why you'd want to choose Knative over those platform as a service offerings, and where they could benefit you. And hopefully you've got a flavor as well of sort of what it looks like in OpenShift, how easy it is to install on OpenShift on IBM Cloud, and what it looks like in OpenShift on IBM Cloud, and what the benefits are of running it within that environment. And I have shared these slides with Adrian, so there's some links to some of the content that I've been through there. So the framework that I stepped through, the absolute framework for building out Knative, I put together a tutorial on that sort of gets you from zero to running a serverless application within IBM Cloud. There's some general white paper pieces, so the bits I mentioned around Knative and the challenges around containers, that's the link to that content, and then a direct link to OpenShift and IBM Cloud, and some instructions in installing Knative on Shift. Okay, so very much so conscious of whistled through that, but sort of wanted to leave some time for some questions and just make this as light as possible could. Okay. Thanks very much.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Anton. Excellent. We have a couple of questions come in during the week as I was encouraging people on LinkedIn to send us any questions they might have in advance or else on the day. But we have a couple. This is a broader question, I think, Anton, but just to start off with this one, someone's asking, how do I start migrating my applications to serverless workloads? Like, where do you start with this type of a process? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so we have, and I say we as in IBM, but for IBM technology, we have what's called a transformation advisor, which will look at your IBM technology stack, but it will also look at your Oracle WebSphere applications, WebLogic application servers. It will look at your JBoss, and it will produce a report on what it will take to move your traditional web application server into a container environment. And then once you have it in a container environment, you can look at deploying that into Knative. And that's the beauty of sort of using the container infrastructure and providing a twist on the container infrastructure. It basically allows that I'm fishing around for the word now, but it basically allows, it's not a complete rewrite from sort of where you were to getting into into serverless. You can evolve into it. It's an evolution. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
And yeah, so we have Transformation Advisor, but also Apsody has some capabilities in there as well. So you can point, if you already have microservices, but just want to run them as Knative, Apsody can look at your Node projects or your Java projects or your Python projects and make them Knative for you.
Very good. Okay. There's another question here. Where do I store my files and install my database?
Right. Okay.
In a serverless environment.
In a serverless environment, today, it fundamentally targets the middleware. Okay. So what we're talking about here is attacking, but we're looking at targeting and accelerating web application development. What I've seen when I'm working with customers is if they're looking at database, they would go and get a platform as a service database from the platform provider. That is changing. So IBM have containerized all their database technology. So you will be able to, or you can today deploy your favorite database technology next to within a container environment, and you can use that from within and call that from within Knative. But to be clear, Knative is around web application development and accelerating that application development stack. Today, it's not targeting Knative. There's no Knative databases. There's an assumption that you're either going to use a platform as a service database, or you're going to use your database technology vendors' preferred approach to providing cloud-based database infrastructure.
Okay, very good. We've one last question. Someone's asked, how can I debug serverless functions?
How can you debug serverless functions? Right. Okay. So there's a couple of answers to that. The first one is debug as in a developer experience. When you're building an application, you've written a lot more code than I have here, and you want to step through that code on your laptop. Okay, so what you can do, because this is fully integrated into Visual Studio Code, once you have Docker, because we're running container technology, once you have Docker installed on your laptop, you can run that environment directly on your laptop, and you can debug like you would any normal application. And Apsody is particularly designed to hook debuggers into a running container, and you can step through code as if you were running that locally on the machine. There's other similar technology for Microsoft, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but sort of the build container developer lifecycle is it's maturing very, very fast, and that's how you debug it on a local machine. In terms of then how do you debug this in a production environment, this is definitely one of the, and I can't believe I didn't have it on the slide deck. It's a huge advantage of running Knative over a PaaS platform. So because you're running Knative on top of your OpenShift cluster, you have admin rights to that OpenShift cluster, unlike when you're running PaaS or serverless or Lambda or functions on a proprietary stack. So you have full access to the worker nodes that are working in your environment. So if you need to debug, if you need to install tools such as, I don't know, Perth, because you want to look at network requests coming through your cluster, you have admin rights to that environment. You can install whatever tooling you need in order to solve that problem. Whereas if you have a network, if you have a performance problem within a PaaS environment, you can't get that access. You have to open a ticket to the platform provider in order to help you debug. And if you're not on the top 10% of their customers, good luck with that. You're not going to get somebody from within that organization to log in and actually tweak and understand your performance problem. So it's a super good question, and I will update my slides to sort of capture that. It's a massive difference why you want to use Knative over a PaaS. But the short answer is you can debug however you want in production because you have a managed environment with admin access.
Very good, excellent. Okay, that's all the questions. Anton, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. That was fantastic. We're going to make this webinar available later, so if you're watching this as a recorded playback on YouTube or anything like that, you can go to the DNAIT page and you'll see further information on this and how to get in touch with us to arrange a one-to-one consultation with Anton and ourselves to look at whatever it is you're trying to do. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll leave it at that. All the best.